right, well, welcome again, and so happy that you all are able to join us today. We're going to get started just by um, having, I'm just going to bring up my, adjusting my screen here. We're going to start with the work session. First item is COVID-19 updates. And I'll probably give this over to Jeff Ruin to see if there's any updates that he has for Iowa City.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have two follow-up items from previous conversations. The first one stems from our conversation at the last work session. We talked about making sure that we wanted to be prepared to infuse additional dollars to help the community in the event that we have a spike in housing requests, or if we're facing some serious eviction situations here in Iowa City. So Councilors Mims, Burgess, and Taylor were part of some communication with me between these last two meetings, and I forwarded a proposal that I'd like to share with the rest of the council tonight, in hopes that we can move forward and feel pretty comfortable with where we stand in terms of emergency housing assistance. So what I'm proposing is that we not try to create any additional programs at this time, that we focus on the three programs that we have active right now. And again, these are local programs, so this is not considering the state dollars. This is not considering the CDBG dollars that Iowa City has received. We're really focusing on our local dollars here. There are three programs that are active that are assisting our residents here in Iowa City. The first is the $50,000 program that is being administered by the Shelter House. You had received an update on that in your information packet, so you know where that program stands. The second is the Center for Worker Justice, My Home to Yours program, which you approved funding for at your last meeting. And the third is our Community Security Deposit program, which assists people getting into homes by providing dollars for the security deposit when that is a barrier. And what I'm proposing is that the council provide me the authorization to replenish those programs should they run out, up to 1.5 times our original commitment. So I'll walk you through what that means for each program. For the Shelter House Rent Relief Program, the original funding committed was $50,000. And I would have the ability to replenish that fund to the tune of another $75,000. The Center for Worker Justice, My Home to Yours program, the original funding commitment from the city was $25,000. And going forward, I would have the ability to replenish that, that program up to an additional $37,500. And then the Community Security Deposit program was originally funded at $75,000. And I would be seeking the ability to replenish that program up to $112,500. So the additional spending authority that I'd be requesting from the council is a total of $225,000. Again, this is not a guarantee that we would spend those dollars, but what we're trying to avoid here is a situation in which one of those programs runs out of funds at a time of great need, and we really don't have the time. Maybe we're between council meetings where we have to formally come to you and ask for additional authorization. We can begin to kind of look at those programs now as they get close to running out of funds, and be ready to extend our funding should there be additional need out there, which we think there probably will be. I wouldn't necessarily fund the entire, use my entire authority at one time. So for example, if the $50,000 runs out at the Shelter House, I would have the ability to replenish that up to $75,000, but I might do that in smaller increments, a $25,000 increment and another $25,000 increment. And that gives us the ability to make sure the program rules are being followed, make sure that things are working according to expectations, and also allows us to report back to you at your meetings to let you know that we've authorized an additional $25,000. And at any point that you may feel comfortable, or if you want to review program rules and regulations, you can kind of press pause at that time without having me committed that entire funding amount. I think a program like this, depending on your comfort level with the dollar amount that I'm talking about, I think that would be able to get us through any sudden spikes that we have, as we're kind of waiting to see what the federal government does. We're waiting to see how effective the CDBG program is, and if we'll get additional CDB dollars from the state. I think it just gives us an additional level of comfort that we'll be able to meet those needs. So I'll stop there and answer any questions about that before going on to item number 2.
Jeff, would any of that have an impact on the city-run utilities, the water, sewer, trash, takeout, and so forth?
You know, at this point, we could use some of those funds to reimburse ourselves. That's not the main focus of the funds right now. We'll probably take a look at that with any additional state CDBG dollars that we get, but we don't have those program rules in place right now, so we're not exactly sure how those will work. So the short answer is yes, but that's not really the focus of those programs as they stand now. Once we get to the point where we need to consider shutoffs again, which isn't on the table right now, we may need to talk about whether we want to open the door with these funds.
Jeff, I'm just wondering about Tracy Highshoe's memo in this information packet about the shelter house program and the possibility of changing some of the criteria. And I'll be honest with you, I probably read it too fast, but I'm just trying to square that. Is that relating to this shelter house program, or is she just talking about the CDBG funds? I just want to make sure if we're authorizing an extension of that program, maybe we should discuss that change in criteria at the same time.
Yes, so that is the same program that we're talking about here. It's the $50,000 program. As of the date of the memo that's in your packet, the shelter house had spent just over $10,000. So there's still a substantial portion of those dollars left. But again, I think what we're worried about is with the unemployment insurance benefits running out, and perhaps some of the eviction protections coming to an end, that there might be an accelerated need for those dollars. But it is the same program, yes.
So I would be favorable to, extending Jeff's authority as he proposed, and also changing the criteria for that shelter house program as Tracy presented in her memo. I do think that I saw an email from the Iowa Finance Authority today that the state program may have also altered their criteria. So hopefully that opens up some additional dollars for people to be eligible. I think they're saying that those who were receiving the $600 a month unemployment will be able to receive that Iowa Finance Authority benefit potentially as well. But yeah, that's what I think. We should yes to both of those.
I would agree. I had communication with Jeff on this and support that increased authorization. Again, I think it, as he's indicated, it avoids some emergency situation where we would have to have a meeting because he doesn't have authority. So this gives him the opportunity to address that in a timely manner. And like Laura said, I would agree to those changes from Tracy's memo that broadens the scope of what they can do.
This is Pauline. I'm also in favor of that and giving him the authority. I just had a question as far as, is there a time frame on this, time limitation? Is it going to be 3 months, or because we really have no idea how long this whole virus thing is going to go on. So, or are there some timeline guidelines on this?
It's a good question. I would probably feel most comfortable if it was extended through the end of the calendar year. And then if we haven't really had a reason to check back in at that point, it probably means we haven't had to spend the dollars. I'd be comfortable with a January 1 kind of spending authority window. And if we get into December and we think that's needed, we can always extend it a little bit.
I still want to ask you.
I'm in favor as well.
I just want to ask you, do you, I really don't remember if I read that on the memo or not. What we're going to do for the people who really cannot prove that COVID was affecting them, but they are really cannot make ends meet and they would like help?
So the two suggestions that Tracy recommended in her memo, which really comes after consultation and talking with the shelter house staff, would be that we allow for self-certification of income and COVID impact, similar to what we did with the Center for Worker Justice agreement. So that would presumably remove some of that barrier to have that that documentation. And then the second one would be allow for the period of assistance for the shelter house program only to go from 2 months of assistance to 3 months of assistance.
You still did not answer my question, really. I'm saying, I'm going to give you an example. Somebody who came to the country, like say March, and they was looking for a job, and they could not find any job, okay? And they still continue looking for a job, and they did not find a job because of COVID. And they are in need, Their income was 0 before March, and their income is still 0 after March. Can they apply for rent?
Yeah, I see Tracy's on the call. I don't know if Tracy, if you've talked about that exact scenario with the shelter house staff. Just going off the cuff here, I think if they're not able to find employment because of COVID, because of a depressed job market as a result of the COVID virus, then yeah. I would say that would count for our local. I don't know that would count for anybody else, but for our local dollars, I would certainly counting that as COVID impact.
Yeah, I'm talking about our local money.
Yeah. Tracy, go ahead.
I can clarify my conversation. So yes, with our federal community development block grant money, you do have to show impact, so that probably would not be eligible. For the local money with shelter house, I asked them to identify the challenge that they had with the agreement that we had in place. They didn't mention that, so I don't know if they're not seeing that or if they've not had that encountered yet. What they did say that their two issues was income verification was a challenge, so I was recommending that we move to self-certifications of income, similar to the Center for Worker Justice Agreement. The other concern that they had was that they were finding people that 2 months wasn't enough, that people that were late for 3 or 4 months with rent or utilities, so they were requesting to go to 3 months. So staff was in support of that. They didn't mention any other issues or challenges when we asked them to comment about what they like changed in the program so they could help folks. So that didn't come up in our conversations.
Because they told them, I was interviewing somebody with them, and they told them he is not eligible because his income wasn't reduced from before March and after March. After March 17 is not reduced. And also there is another situation happen in front of me where somebody was not working enough before March. He was he started looking for a job, and he get hired after March. Like from January to March, he couldn't find a job. He find a job after March, but his job even is because he find a part-time job where he can make only 600 and his rent is like 1,300, and he need the difference at least. And those kind of people, I think the wife was looking for a job. She couldn't find because of COVID. If the wife and the husband were, is a normal time, they would have find a job, both of them, and they can pay the rent, both of them together. This is a local money. We have to be flexible and help people. That's why I'm saying if somebody really cannot, you have the income in front of you and you see the rent is 1,200 and the income is say 900 or 700 and they have 3 children. Why we cannot help those people? Because you know, the 2 parents cannot find job. One of them is just the one who find job during this bad time, and all of them, all this situation happened to the people who are new in the country. I think, and they live in the city of Iowa City residents. We need to help them out.
So I would say that's just where a council is in terms of your comfort level. You could assume COVID impact for everybody. That the pandemic is great and great enough and has an impact where it's just assumed to have impacted everybody on some level. You still have to income certify, but that's really a council policy preference on how you want to craft your local programs.
I just want to say one thing. In terms of the programs that the contracts that you have authorized to date, it requires some showing of COVID impact. If you want to do a different set of contracts and a different type of funding for other reasons, you can do that. But we're going to have, and we've allowed self-certification. I agree with Jeff that the situation that Maz was describing could be because of COVID impact, and that could be self-certified. But we can't, within the framework of the agreements that we currently have, eliminate the COVID impact requirement.
Agreement with what, Eleanor?
With Shelter House, with Community, and with Center for Worker Justice.
I'm not talking about community. This is federal money. And you told me guys before this, we have to follow the federal guideline on that. No doubt. I'm talking about the 50,000. Also, I'm not talking about our agreement because it's already done. But while you are modifying the agreement for the shelter house, because to begin with, the 50,000, because we said there is people are not eligible for federal money, so we can give them this. And I think if Jeff said, if we went with what Jeff said, just let us assume COVID impact for everything, that we can modify the shelter house money for our agreement, you know, for the Center for Worker Justice. I don't even want to talk about it because that agreement is done and they have to follow the agreement. But now we are modifying the shelter house agreement. Then we should add that to the shelter house agreement, especially their money is still there. And you know, they spend only a few $1,000s.
I think what I explained when we first started into this is we have to identify the public purpose. We have identified that as COVID impact, and we have to have some minimal showing that that's what the money is going to. I'm comfortable with self-certification. If you want to completely change up the contract so that they don't have to be connected to the COVID-19 impact, then we need to identify what that public interest is and how we're going to deal with that. And
what about self-testing that I did not find a job because of COVID?
I just said that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it seemed to me that what Jeff explained and what you're talking about would all fit under the proposed amendment for shelter house. If someone comes in and says, I can't make, you know, I can't get a job that because of COVID, I can't earn enough money to pay my rent. That's a COVID impact. Because of COVID, I can't even find a job so that I can pay my rent. That's a self-certified COVID impact as well, at least from my perspective.
I agree.
Yes. Okay, I guess we are in the same page, but this situation will go through then if somebody did not find any job before, and now even they don't find job still. I did not find job because of COVID impact.
So when we work with the shelter house to amend the rules as Tracy has proposed, Tracy will just have that conversation with them on what it means to self-certify for COVID impact. And I think all this works itself out.
Mm-hmm. As long as you're going to accommodate those people, I think I'm fine with the way that self-certify person can write anything. That's not a problem.
Hey, Jeff, I was wondering if there's any other, well, I do appreciate and do agree with what we're going to do now, because the majority of the council does agree with the proposal for the COVID relief. But I did wonder if we were hearing from anyone else that has a need. I know that Better Together had reached out. I'm not sure if there's an update from them. Are there any businesses reaching out with some relief request, or are we not getting that so much?
Yeah, Better Together was my item number 2. So if everybody's comfortable on the housing matter, we can move to that, and I can start to get into the Better Together request. Does that sound okay? Okay, so as you know, the Better Together group previously had requested $25,000 towards their Hold Your Own gift card program. The Johnson County Board of Supervisors had committed $40,000, I believe, to that program, and there has been over $85,000 raised privately for that program. That program rewards people that spends dollars at local businesses by giving them a gift card. It also sets aside some incentive that is going to be used to assist BIPOC-owned business owners in Johnson County who have experienced a negative impact due to COVID. And where things stand right now, the gift card program is rolling pretty strong right now. They have accounted for over $100,000 in local spending. And I think the gift cards issued itself have been somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe $12,000. So they still have a considerable amount of funds left in that program. One of the, I think it's safe to say, kind of a surprise was when they went out and sought applications from the BIPOC-owned businesses who need assistance. They received 50 applications from local businesses requesting $244,000. And I think that they anticipate only being able to meet probably somewhere between 10 to 20% of that request through the Hold Your Own program. So I've had a few conversations with members of the Better Together committee that are administering that grant program, and they came forward with a suggestion that I think has a lot of merit, and that is, instead of the city contributing $25,000 to the gift card program, that we would designate our $25,000 towards a phase 2 grant offering for those BIPOC-owned businesses that are located in Iowa City. And so I'll give you some numbers. Again, in all of Johnson County, they had 50 applications requesting $244,000. If you just break that down to the Iowa City businesses, there were 33 applicants requesting $163,000. Now, some of those 33 that were requesting $163,000 will be funded in kind of the phase 1 offering of this grant program, but we know that there will be many other applicants that don't get funded or that don't get nearly the funding they need. And I should have mentioned, of those 33 applicants that are from Iowa City, 16 of them indicated that they have not received any funding support from the state or federal government to date. So there's a good number of these applicants that didn't get PPP loans or didn't get state assistance that are really fighting through this on their own. So the modified request that we could bring to you at your next meeting, if everybody felt comfortable with it, would be to designate the $25,000 for a phase 2 grant program to Iowa City based BIPOC-owned businesses. And those dollars would be allocated by the same committee that is allocating the dollars through the Better Together committee, and would be our first step forward in offering local business support through the pandemic. So I'll stop there and answer any questions you have about the request and what this may look like going forward.
Yeah, I do know about this program. I've read it through an email that I received about it. And I do find that the $25,000 request from the city would be appropriate. I guess the question that I have is, can we limit our funds to only Iowa City businesses?
Yeah, so I believe the Better Together, they've assembled a panelist, a group of people that are reviewing the applications. And my understanding is that they plan to make their allocations here in a couple of weeks. So we would wait for that process to end up, to carry all the way through. And then we would then take the subset of Iowa City only businesses that remain and offer our own grant program. So basically it's kind of a phase 2 grant program. But yes, we can limit our dollars to just those businesses. And if other communities wanted to join in and contribute towards the businesses owned in their communities, I'm sure that would be an option that the Better Together group would entertain as well.
Well, I think the council had previously discussed supporting the gift card program, and I think most of us were in favor of that. I like this one a lot better, I guess personally. It does seem like a good fit, and very grateful for Better Together to come back with a kind of an acknowledgement that, you know, maybe the way the first request was established, that same need isn't there or was fulfilled more than they thought. So I would also just say, from a process standpoint, we talked before about, you know, future nonprofit requests coming relating to COVID relief to maybe go through the emergency funding procedure that we talked about it earlier this year. I don't know how this would or would not fit within that, but I think, you know, since the majority of council already was favorable to the 25,000 to Better Together, I'm comfortable saying yes to this request.
I would agree, and like you, Laura, I think this is actually a better use of the money, more directly to people in need versus doing the gift cards. And I think that's also indicated just by the amount of money that the Better Together campaign still has left on those gift cards. So I would much prefer this approach.
I think this is an excellent idea.
I was actually of two minds on the gift card. I was on the fence on it, but I think this is a much more positive approach.
I agree too. I think it goes along with everything we've talked about in helping to support local businesses.
Okay, so we'll put a resolution together on both of these items, both my spending authority and the grant program that we just talked about. Those will be ready for your next meeting. Any other questions that you have for me?
I just wanted to ask if you had any sense or feedback of how the face covering mandate is going. I know that the County Board of Health just passed theirs, and I guess that will be taken up Thursday at the Board of Supervisors. But I wanted to get a sense from the city's point of view. And my second question, which is sort of not necessarily directly for you, is how the university is going to approach move into dorms.
So the face coverings, you know, just anecdotally, I think the mandate has made a very positive impact. I know just as I'm out and about, I noticed a much higher level of compliance. Our transit department has noted increased compliance on the buses with mask wearing. And since the order was issued, we've only had 17 calls for service into the police department, which is much lower than I expected. And some of those calls were really just seeking clarification and not necessarily reporting issues where there may have been non-compliance. So we've had 17 calls. There's been no need for citations. Officers have been able to either come out and address the issue through education or providing a mask, or when they arrived at wherever the location was, there was no observed non-compliance with the order. So in my view, it's had a very positive impact on the community. I know there's concerns with the kind of bars and restaurants, especially late at night, and concerns on what those will look like, going forward. You may have seen in the news that the state has informed license holders that they plan to start enforcement of the governor's orders, which I think will have a much greater impact than any enforcement that we could do with our mask order. So we don't have exact ideas on how the state will do enforcement, but we do expect the state to be coming to town here and helping us with enforcement for bars and restaurants. So I'll keep you informed as we learn more about that process.
I wanted to add that I've heard from a lot of people within the community that have really been appreciative for the order, various reasons that I've been given. On the flip side, I do know that there have been a very small amount of people that have reached out that have criticized the order. There has been some that, stated that they don't agree with the order, whether they believe that I had the power to do that or not. But overall, even those individuals, many of them stated that even though they don't agree, they did appreciate the efforts to reduce the amount of COVID. So some, totally didn't agree. But overall, I think in our community, and I've been out and about looking around, and people are compliant for the most part. One of the challenges I think that we could find as a community is that we might find some conflict with people that don't wear their mask. And I think we don't know why a person isn't wearing a mask, and I want people to be just sensitive to that fact. They could have one of the excluding reasons why. And so we don't want to make assumptions. And so I really believe that it is individually do what we can to ensure that we're wearing a mask if we don't fit one of those excluding reasons. And so very proud of our community. I'm hoping to see, the results and the numbers, because research has shown that if people are wearing masks, we're going to see a reduction, and especially now that we're going to be getting closer to school starting, as well as both the university as well as our local Iowa City community school districts returning. I'm hoping that this act will keep us a lot safer.
My question with respect to move into the dorms is and I don't know if we as a city have any information on this right now, but I believe that Iowa State is testing students before they move into the dorms. And what I've read here is that the University of Iowa at this point is not.
I do not have any information on that, but I'm happy to contact the university and follow up with the council. I see Ryan jumping on. He may have some information.
Yeah, I have a little bit. Yeah, the university is not planning to test students when they get back to campus, mainly because I think after consulting with UIHC, they were told that testing all 30,000 students right when they get back would only provide a snapshot in time. And I think they worry about giving students the sense like, oh, I tested negative, so I'm fine. I don't have it, and they're going to catch everybody who does have it. So they're just reserving tests for essentially symptomatic cases, and then those who know that they've been exposed to COVID. And so you can go to through student health to get a test that way. Otherwise, if you're asymptomatic and you want to get a test, then you'll have to go to the Test Iowa site in Cedar Rapids. As for move-in, I don't have much information. I know that they plan to do 1 hour time slots, and you're only allowed to bring 2 people with you to help you move. I know that they're going to try and distance it more and spread out more. So I'm assuming that the move-in process, instead of 3 days like it normally is probably going to be a week to 2 weeks. I can get more information on that and send it along to council. But yeah, I know Iowa State actually started moving in, I think today. I have friends who started moving in today to Iowa State, but besides the RAs at Iowa, I don't think any other students have started to move in yet.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Anything else on this?
Jeff, could you just report on the PPE that Iowa City purchased and has been distributing through nonprofits real quick?
Yes, we have ordered 15,000 face coverings, a mix of one-time masks, cloth masks, and face shields. And at last count, we had distributed nearly 10,000 of those face coverings. I believe we have 9 nonprofits that we have provided face coverings to, and we've provided some to the Iowa City Downtown District and to the business partnership as well. We do have masks remaining, and if anybody hears this message and needs it, we are targeting nonprofits and businesses that need those for their employees or for their customers. And would like, if I have the extra minute, to just say thank you to the University of Iowa. We were able to purchase excess masks that they had ordered this year that they do not believe that they will need. So they had extra supply, which allowed us to get them very quickly and at a very reasonable cost, and get those out the door almost immediately after your authorization to do so.
Great. Anything else on this topic? All right, thank you, Jeff, for the update. We're going to move on to the second item on our agenda, which is related to Black Lives Matter and systemic racism. Here in our in the resolutions that council has created. Also, I'll draw your attention to July 30th, the IP3 item on that July 30th. There is an update there of how we're kind of tracking this from the city perspective. So I know that Councilor Burgess and Weiner went out, and maybe you all have some reports that you want to give to us at this point. One thing that I did want to maybe personally do is maybe talk overall about, maybe re-looking at how are we going to reach some of these goals. The timelines are kind of fluent at this point, and wondered if there's anything that we feel like we can take on. I do know that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has been on the forefront, but there's quite a few other things I think that we want to achieve. So hopefully throughout this conversation, we can bring up some next steps for a few things. All right, Councilor Burgess or Weiner?
Sure, I can jump in, Mayor, with updates just from the work that Janice and I have done. I always like to provide a little bit of context for people that might be tuning in or haven't been watching our meetings. On June 16th, we passed a 17-point resolution in response to the Black Lives Matter movement supporting the end of systemic racism in our community. And so we've committed to a number of different endeavors restructuring our police department, forming a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, allocating $1 million towards a number of equity programs and initiatives in Iowa City. And so we continue to have this item on our work session agenda, and then also occasionally on formal meetings as we make progress on these items. As Jeff has reported before, and what I also want to highlight for anyone who might be watching is icgov.org/BLM is where you can find constant updates on our commitments and the progress that we are making there. As you mentioned, Mayor, there's a very nice PDF that has kind of a snapshot of where we are. That was in our information packet issued on July 30th was the most recent one. But if you go to icgov.org/BLM, you can see all kinds of information about the initiatives that we're continuing to push forward. I can speak to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Last week, Janice Weiner and I met with Raneem Hamad from the Iowa Freedom Riders, first individually, and then we had a meeting later in the week with Raneem from IFR, as well as with representatives from the South District Neighborhood Association, and had some overlap with some of the South District neighborhood folks, as well as Councilor Weiner as representatives of the Black Voices Project, although there were some people who couldn't attend from Black Voices Project that day. So we're continuing to seek input from them. We talked through some proposals that the Freedom Riders had provided to the South District and to the Black Voices Project relating to the formation of the commission. And also you'll see in our late handouts, we had a letter that was provided from some representatives of the South District Neighborhood Association with their very specific input on the formation of the commission. In our initial resolution, the City Council committed to forming the commission by October 1st. And we talked at our last meeting about some of the criteria. So for example, how many members we might have on the commission, what the application process might look like, if the commission would be Iowa City residents, or we might allow non-residents if they had certain areas of expertise or represented certain groups. As well as the duration of the commission, that this is indicated as an ad hoc commission. So at least in the beginning, there might be some time frame in which it would be operating, whether or not there would be some, what staff support for the commission might look like. One idea that we've had that we fleshed out a little bit since the last meeting is the concept of a facilitator to assist the commission that might be someone external to city staff. As we've discussed before, it's important that this undertaking be independent from just us, that it not be just City Council. It will be a public commission appointed by City Council, but we're hoping that the undertaking that the commission supports is one that facilitates community conversations in many sectors of Iowa City, in employment, education, healthcare, other, not just the provision of city services, or not just a specific to Iowa City. And so as we go through all of this, we're trying to balance the requirements of a city commission with the need for independence and seeking input from stakeholders in our communities of color. So I would say as of right now, we're still, we don't have a draft of the resolution to form the commission as we thought we might have for this evening, but have followed up with our city attorney on getting, what could be the framework for that. As you all recall, our last meeting, we did look at a couple of examples of resolutions for formation of the commission, or of recent commissions that the city has formed. So some takeaways from the meetings that we've had: I think the Iowa Freedom Riders are requesting that there be 5 members on the commission. The South District Neighborhood Association is requesting a larger commission, and I think the input that we received from city councilors at our last meeting was also more on the side of a larger commission. I think there's a theme of making sure that people who are serving will be those who've had experiences in our community that relate to the subject matter of the commission, which is finding the truth of systemic racism and hearing the stories and giving credit and credibility to what is occurring in our community, and then moving to the reconciliation place. So, you know, we know that the commissioners themselves are not just, you know, people who would be coming forward and telling their stories. The commissioners are those who are going to be facilitating this wider community process. But I think the feedback that we've received, which I agree with, is that having individuals who themselves have experienced some of those negative things in our community is important. So that's kind of where we are. I should also say that the Freedom Riders are being supported by a group from the University of Iowa Center for Human Rights. They've coalesced kind of a working group, and also a couple of members of our Human Rights Commission are serving sort of in that working group. So there's overlap in those different circles or centers, networks of expertise as well. I don't know if anyone else has questions or input, or Janice, if you have other things I missed.
I think that was pretty comprehensive. I mean, I would just add that there was a real focus in some of the discussions on the need to make sure that the commission ends up being inclusive of a variety of the BIPOC voices in Iowa City that have been affected by this, and that it also not rush its work, either the formation or its work, because it's really important in the long run to get this right.
All right, thanks to both of you. I do know that one of the goals is for us to kind of get a resolution for, or kind of the charge for the commissioners. I guess my question would be, my understanding from the last meeting was that this is something that will kind of get initially crafted outside, and then it'd be presented to council. Were thoughts on that?
And I don't, Laura, please chime in. My sense is that as we are going to continue conversations, and that I would hope that certainly before the next council meeting that we will have the time and ability to put together at least a framework for consideration.
Yep, and that's fair enough. And I just wanted to make sure that it was out there for public knowledge, that is the plan that we're having. So thank you. And I do know that Black Voices Project does want to very much weigh in on this. I've had conversations with some of the leadership there, or very involved members. And so we'll wait for them to kind of talk to you too and give their official input, and then we'll be able to share that publicly as well. So any other item related to the commission?
I don't have an item related to the commission, but I have something else related to our resolution when we get to that.
If no one else has anything else, then I think we can talk about the resolution in general, because I do believe that we've been kind of focused on one area, well, maybe two, but I wanted to touch base on items from the resolution as well. So now would be a good time if no one else has anything.
Okay, what I wanted to touch on, one of the other really big issues in the resolution, which is our commitment to develop a preliminary plan to restructure the Iowa City Police Department toward community policing. It has a deadline of December 15th for a preliminary plan. And I think that's going to come upon us much more quickly than any of us could imagine. So as a result, I would like to throw out for for consideration that we maybe undertake an effort to build a repository of elements, is what I'm calling it, of ideas and models over the next month to 6 weeks. And the way I would suggest, one way that I would suggest that we could look at it is to do a series of essentially focused listening posts, several of which could be in parks and neighborhoods, socially distanced and with face coverings, each of which could be attended by 2 or 3 council members, as well as perhaps a representative of the city manager's office and someone to take notes. A couple maybe as well via Zoom for people who would rather not or cannot be out in public during COVID. And then I think we'd also be well served by doing at least one with the nonprofit agencies that work in the fields of like mental health, homelessness, crisis, domestic violence, sexual assault, immigrant rights, and so forth. And then we can collect ideas and thoughts in writing as well, maybe via our council email. It wouldn't matter to me personally if people are focused on a single issue or on a broader concept. I don't think that any idea would be either too small or too big. So that's sort of what I would throw out there, that I would view as a cooperative, collaborative, and community undertaking, which of course still has to have as a major focus the BIPOC community and its experiences. And I think that would also encompass other issues such as the best way to deal with mental health, addiction-related or homelessness-related calls or traffic issues. And I would see something like that as just the beginning of a process to come up with this preliminary restructuring plan.
One thought I was having with respect to the restructuring the police department was trying to get a better understanding of the what I believe are the 17,000 interactions that our police department has with the public, I believe, on a yearly basis. I'm personally interested in trying to understand the nature of those interactions and engagements. You know, what types of engagements are there? You know, I've spoken to many of you about the question of traffic law enforcement. You know, that's a significant piece of how our police department engages with the community. But I'm sure there are other categories that we could identify to get a better idea of what those interactions are, where they may occur, and how they impact, if there is a pattern, you know, our BIPOC community. It seems to me it would be helpful to have that kind of information so we could get a better idea of what types of engagements seem to result in complaints with our CPRB that result in disproportionate contact, and try to use that as sort of a platform on which to then inform our thoughts regarding how we would restructure the police department. So that, you know, that kind of data analysis would take some time. So I would like to suggest that it could serve as a starting point or a coincident point for, you know, developing those kinds of models and precedents that we may be looking at.
Agree with both Janice and John. I think the community and we set for ourselves, I think, a pretty aggressive timeline for this, given just all the ordinary work that we need to do and staff needs to do. So I think to start to gather as much input as we can from the public. And Janice, I really like, you know, the variety of mechanisms that you have mentioned, from, you know, gatherings in parks where people can be socially distanced, but you can kind of have that face-to-face conversation, to, you know, to doing some Zoom meetings, to emails to council. And even possibly, maybe the city staff can set up more of an anonymous way for people to offer ideas and suggestions online. But I think doing at least some in person and with council representation, and very carefully selecting those locations so we can get representation across the community, and particularly obviously across the BIPOC community is most important. Likewise, with what you've said, John, the idea of using data to help inform decisions and models and changes, I think makes a lot of sense. And so I don't know, obviously Jeff and the IT staff and ICPD can give us a better idea of how easy and or difficult and time consuming it might be to break some of that down. But I would guess that a lot of it could be broken down, at least at a high level, probably with not a terrible amount of effort. The one, I guess, additional piece that I would throw out is that I think as we look at this process of trying to gather information so that we can discuss it and put something together and have the public react, et cetera, I would want to make sure that we do not exclude our staff from input as well. We've made it clear that we don't expect or want necessarily the staff to drive this process or drive the decisions. These obviously are council decisions, but I think we would be remiss if we did not respect and take advantage of expertise that we do have on staff, even from the Iowa City Police Department, and take all these pieces, all of them, from anybody who wants to and has information to kind of put into the hopper, into this repository, as Janice has called it, to give us the absolute most information for us to analyze and come up with a decision. So, but thank you both, Janice and John. I appreciate your comments.
I also appreciate that, John, because I think I didn't realize that 17,000 calls, that's a lot of calls. So it would be helpful if we had some kind of data to break it down to see just how many of those perhaps were related to social services, mental health, or alcohol, or even domestic abuse kinds of calls, rather than traffic stops or those kinds of things. So I think that would be very helpful.
Just to clarify real quick, it's our 2019 calls for service were 77,000, not 17.
Too many numbers to, I knew there was a 7 in there, but.
Yeah. As far as the, definitely reaching out to the community to have listening posts, listening sessions, I think is very positive. One of the things that I know just from I think the 3 events that we held, Mayor Pro Tem and I were involved with having some speak up and speak out. We wanted to make sure that we reached out to the BIPOC community, essentially to ensure that they were a part of it. And we were happy with our efforts, although it was so quick that we didn't have time to really reach out like we wanted to, but the word got out really quickly, and there were definitely some Black BIPOC individuals a part of that, sharing their own personal stories, which were very meaningful, very powerful to hear from those individuals specifically. So I think whatever we do, we want to make sure that there are just conversations about how we can best reach out to ensure that the BIPOC population or individuals are notified and are present.
I just think that, let us be clear here. This is a Black Lives Matter problem, and they are the one who requesting, this restructure of the police department. So we have to reach out. Definitely, our priority have to focus on reaching out, as the mayor said, to the Black people in the community and the immigrant in the community. White people, they don't have a lot of bad experience with the police, and our data showing that most likely the people of color being stopped more than just the human right data that they released last, I guess, the beginning of this year or maybe the end of last year that we saw. It tells us clearly that the Black people in this community has been on the focus and they've been stopped more than white people in this community. It was clear. People of color in general, they are the one who've been affected by this. If we really want to listen to the people for like, how can we structure the police? We have to put that priority. You know, after we listen to that, we don't mind hearing from other people, and there is many good people in this community have experience and they support our effort and we can hear from them. There is no problem. But our focus have to be on that. Listening to the police department to like how we structure the police, I don't think so. That's my own opinion. That will be the last one to like, because I cannot listen to the people who are, we want to restructure them to tell us how we can structure them, restructure them. Okay, to me it's odd. I'm not gonna support that. But we would like to put the people of color as a priority, to reach out to them and listen to them. What they think that they want. As the mayor said, when we went out to do this listening, this speak out event, we heard this story that heartbreaking. And all the people who being there, they start hearing how the Iowa City Police Department was treating the people of color in this community. We heard it, and you know, the white people in this community have a lot of things for granted. You know, we heard people who just scared when they go to the highway, their kids walking with them, they don't have to put their hand in their pocket, because there is assumption that maybe they stole something. That's why they have, take your hand out your pocket. We hear people saying those kind of things. White people, they don't have to worry about that when they walk in on the highway or somebody else. This is affecting people of color and Black people in this community. Let us give the, you know, everything the name that it deserves, and let us give everything that the, you know, the focus is deserved. And I'm gonna just really pushing for priority to listen and hear from the people of color in this community and make that priority.
All right.
Well, I was just going to ask Mayor if maybe, it sounds like the majority of counselors are in favor of this listening post idea. So whatever we need to do to kind of move that forward. I know Mayor Pro Tem and I think we need to get back to Kelly with dates for this month to do the normal listening post anyway. And I don't know, Mazahir, if you're interested in us maybe focusing on that for that listening post, or trying to have some overlap. I think that's one opportunity. I would just like to ask maybe that the staff go ahead and start collecting that data or framing up that data for us. I know there's some very high level data about disproportionate minority contact in the annual study. And then there's also some other high level data about charges and traffic stops that's reflected in our equity scorecard, which comes out every year and is also linked at icgov.org/BLM is the equity scorecard. And there's just, again, some very high level information there relating to charges and traffic stops and broken down by race. But I think even, Jeff, if you could just let us know, is it the kind of undertaking that staff could assist in compiling information about types of stops and areas of stops, patterns, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can pull that together, and I think, frankly, it's going to be critical to making informed decisions when you're looking at how to respond to certain calls differently, which we're on board with. Absolutely, you have to know how many calls for those types of events there are, and how frequently they come. Are they seasonal? Do they happen at night, during the day? Are they spread? All that's going to affect your staffing model. So you're going to need a whole lot of data to help guide your decision making going forward. And I think it's really powerful to put that data in the hands of the people who have some ideas out there, whether that's residents or nonprofit employees. We've got to, I think that's the next step. And John was right on point. We've got to pull that together in a meaningful way, get it to the public, and then have some really informed discussions on how we might go about things differently with the goal of better serving the public going forward.
To that point, Jeff, as I'm thinking about this, from your perspective, and to be interested in what other counselors think, I guess one, how long would it take, do you think, maybe you can't answer this right now, obviously, to kind of get that into some meaningful form for us? And then to counselors, do you think it makes sense to wait for that data before we try and schedule meetings and gather input from the public so that they can also see that data before they start, you know, making suggestions about changes and new models, et cetera?
I don't know that you need to wait for it. There's probably a certain level of information that we can get to you right away that would be informative for your audiences at these listening posts. But as ideas come in, we may need to dissect the data a little bit differently to kind of test out those theories, if you will. So I wouldn't necessarily think you need to wait. I think you can get going. We'll get you some good information to get started with. We'll get it in a good presentable form, and then we'll just refine based on what we're hearing from the community.
I agree with Jeff, because I think we really wouldn't want to influence them by showing them the data that we have. We wouldn't want to hinder them from maybe bringing up their own stories, because I think that's what we want to hear are their stories about how they've been influenced by this.
If I could add one thing.
One other quick aspect of the data that came to my mind in looking at our material was whether it might be useful with respect to the CPRB to have an understanding of where those complaints are coming from. Or is there a pattern with respect to that? In other words, if it's complaints that are driven by traffic stops or perhaps domestic calls, things of that sort. So we begin to see if there are particular types of engagement which have a higher likelihood of resulting in a complaint that we could then, in my mind, it's almost like preventive medicine. How can we make a change to that form of engagement, which may help simply reduce the number of complaints that are filed with the CPRB?
I like the data issue you brought up, John, is really helpful. To me, a lot of the storytelling and the truth telling is really going to be the province of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. When I think of public fora of one sort or another, my hope would be that perhaps some of the experience that people have had will lead them to say, and this, because this happened, and this is the change that I see as necessary, or this is the area that really needs to be changed, as opposed to a really storytelling session, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
If I could just offer one other thing I think would be important for the community discussion is proof that these alternative solutions work, because we do have evidence here, and we can share some of that data. We can talk about how opening the winter shelter 4 or 5 years ago reduced calls for service. We can do that same with Cross Park Place. We can talk about the mobile crisis unit that already exists in Johnson County that many people don't know about, and how many calls that responds to, and how that relieves our need to respond to those calls for service. So I think proving to people that there is a path forward here is equally as important here too. You want people to come in with ideas, but there's going to be some skeptics out there too. And it's not to say that every idea will work, but we have shown that alternative responses can be effective, and that's really something I think we need to get out there more as we're having these discussions.
One thing I think we'll find is our community is very they bring solutions often to us, and ideas, and I think we're going to find that. I've been talking to, of course, a lot of people throughout this process, BIPOC population specific or individuals specifically, and many of us have ideas on several resolution things that can be in place to really change the way that our police currently operate. So I think we're going to be very surprised and just enlightened by some of the ideas that come through this process.
I think that's great, Bruce. And I think the more that we can reach out to the BIPOC community, and, I don't think any of us sitting here disagree with what Mom said. The focus needs to be on getting the input from the BIPOC community. That has to be absolutely the highest priority of how do they see changes that could be made that could impact their interactions, and decrease interactions, make any necessary interactions go better, whatever it might be. So we definitely need to reach out. And I guess what my question to you, to all the counselors, are there other ways, better ways, additional ways that you feel that we can get that input? I mean, we can only do so many public meetings. Some people won't come, some people can't come, some people won't be comfortable in that environment speaking. We can, put all kinds of information out. They can send us emails. People may not want to be identified. Can we do any kind of a survey monkey or whatever? I mean, what other ideas are there so that we really can try to get the most and broadest and best input possible? So I'm open to anything that people think will work so that we can get the most information and most input possible.
I guess personally, I think starting with this could be step one, and then we can certainly get input from anyone that is out in the public that think they may have some suggestions for us. Mm-hmm. Certainly, we do have the South District IFR as well as the Black Voices Project that has had significant contact with the BIPOC community, and so there could be ways to certainly advertise through them or even get some suggestions as to how we can certainly reach out.
Jeff, can I ask a question? How difficult is it, and again, maybe you need to come back, I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I come back to Janice's word of repository, I guess. How difficult is it to set something up, say with our website, where people could just go to a spot on the website and like click a button and type in a comment kind of thing? I'm just trying to think, and I realize that doesn't work for everybody, and that's why we need to do in person. People can send snail mail, whatever works. But is that something that would be real hard for staff to do?
No, that's easy. We could turn that around very quickly. You're just, I think, basically looking for a mode of input, just an empty text box, maybe with a couple of prompting questions, and that's very simple to do.
And Susan, you'd mentioned earlier, I think you used the term anonymous, and I think, Jeff, is that difficult to do? I'm technically challenged for people to submit comments anonymously.
No, we can do that.
And I would encourage that with it, we give them the option. of leaving a name and contact information, but make it very clear that it is optional, so that if people, want us to know, so if they potentially wanted feedback from us or something, or if we wanted to ask clarifying questions, at the same time, they feel totally comfortable not to give any identifying information if they don't want to. And certainly that's obviously just one mechanism in addition to the others that we've talked about. But I would like to encourage staff, if other counselors are comfortable, that we kind of start with that and try and figure out either tonight or relatively quickly some dates for some in-person meetings, and figure out those locations and counselors who might want to be a part of that.
Definitely, I will, encourage that, to ask them if they can put their name, even though if it's like optional. But if they can put their name, will be really great, so we can see where we're getting this feedback. At least, like the people, because we need diversity of people to give us feedback, will be great. So hopefully, it's optional, definitely no problem, but encouraging them, if we have it there and it's optional, people, if they want to do it, they will do it. But like not completely anonymous, just give them the option. I agree with Susan on that.
Maybe another thing related to that, Maz, and if this is possible, Jeff, is also, if there's a couple of questions, maybe giving them the option, again, optional, to identify by ethnicity.
Yes.
Right? Ethnicity.
Optional, yeah.
Yeah, definitely optional.
Mm.
I have a specific request. If we're going to be doing a web form, if we can make sure that it's directing people to resources online as well. Like, we don't know how they're going to get to the form necessarily, but I often push people towards the city's email subscriptions. We have a bazillion different email subscriptions, and if you subscribe to the right ones, you are really in the know about things. So I don't know if we have one yet that's sort of equity and BLM specific. I imagine there is, but just, Jeff, if we can confirm that's happening, so that if someone were to submit input on something like this, to make sure that if they choose to enter their email address, they will then be getting updates on this process and the city's initiatives along these lines.
Very doable.
All right. So it does sound like Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor Burgess, if I heard it correct.
The first one.
Uh-oh, Mayor's frozen.
Yeah, Mayor just froze.
So Maz and Laura, you're going to handle the first listening post. We'll just have you work with Kelly on a date, and then we'll get that promoted out. And I think other counselors can start to think about locations and follow-up dates too. So we can carry that over to the next work session if you'd like, and then we'll at least have one scheduled by that time and can build the subsequent ones after that.
Mm-hmm.
Am I frozen by chance?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to sign out and sign back in. If there's nothing else, Mayor Pro Tem, can you lead us to the next item?
Oh, I have to open the agenda. You just
400.
Yep,
400 North Clinton
yes.
preservation proposal.
Yes, as IB number 4. And do we have presentation?
Yes, good evening. This is Ann Russett with Neighborhood and Development Services. I do have a presentation. Is there a way that the host can allow me to share my screen?
Okay, Kelly, or who is the host?
You should be able to, Ann.
Okay, now I can. Yep, thanks. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to get this on the right one. Okay. All right, so as was mentioned, this is a discussion on the 400 North Clinton. This was presented to the council back in February. So I have a few slides that I'd like to go through. The purpose of tonight is really to get some feedback from the city council on next steps. In terms of background, this initially started because the Historic Preservation Commission submitted an application to designate 410, 412 North Clinton Street as a Iowa City Historic Landmark. That local landmark designation failed, and after that failed attempt at that rezoning, staff worked with the property owner to identify another solution to get that property landmarked. At that time, the property owner proposed redeveloping 400 North Clinton Street and 112 East Davenport Street in exchange for voluntarily landmarking 410, 412 North Clinton. This item was discussed with the Historic Preservation Commission in January of 2020 and then in February with the council. And at that time, the city council directed staff to continue to work with the property owner on revised plans for the redevelopment of 400 North Clinton Street and 112 East Davenport Street. And we did receive some revised plans from the property owner. Many of the concerns that were raised by the commission and the council were addressed in the revised plans, but there were some changes that we felt were significant enough that we needed to get more input from the Historic Preservation Commission. So in July, last month, the Preservation Commission reviewed the revised draft. Next, I just have some images here for context. This is 410 North Clinton Street. This is the historic structure. So this is the property that would be landmarked as a local historic landmark. 400 North Clinton is right here. This is 112 East Davenport. This would be redeveloped. Here's an image of 410, 412 North Clinton. Again, this is the historic structure. This is 400 North Clinton Street and 112 East Davenport Street, which would be demolished as part of the proposal. And just another photograph for context here. You can see the historic structure in the back next to 400 North Clinton on the corner. And Courier Hall is across the street. The elevations that we received and that the council and that the commission reviewed earlier this year are shown on the screen here. It was a 6-story building with a gabled roof, 2 elevations. And when we took this to the commission in January, they had a lot of concerns with the scale of the proposed development, but ultimately the commission wanted to save 410, 412 North Clinton Street. We also received some input from Friends of Historic Preservation, and they recommended some design changes to the building, specifically to remove the 6th story and allow 5 stories with no step back, but to have it be a flat roof instead of a gabled roof. And the commission and the city council both agreed with those design changes. The other concern that was brought up during the city council meeting in February was the lack of open space shown on the plans. So we provided these comments to the property owner. If you remember from our discussion in February of 2020, in order to develop the property as is proposed, it would require both a rezoning, a map amendment, and a text amendment. What is being proposed goes beyond what is allowed by our current zoning code. So this chart here just provides kind of a side-by-side comparison of what's currently on the ground, what could be redeveloped under the current zoning, and then what is being proposed. So at 410, 412 North Clinton Street, currently there are 18 units on that property and 9 parking spaces. It's a 2-story structure. If it was redeveloped under the current zoning, the maximum number of units that our zoning code would allow is 24 one-bedroom units, and 24 parking spaces would also be required for those 24 one-bedroom units, and the height limit is 35 feet. At 400 North Clinton Street and 112 East Davenport Street, there are currently 11 units in those 2 buildings, and there are 7 spaces, 7 parking spaces. There's a 2.5-story building and a 1-story building. And similarly to 410, 412, if this area was redeveloped, they could get 24 one-bedroom units. They need to provide 24 parking spaces, and the maximum height is 35 feet. So if that entire area is developed, both 410, 412, and 400 North Clinton Street 1 and 112 East Davenport Street, the maximum number of bedrooms and units would be 48 one-bedroom units, and 48 parking spaces would be required. So what's being proposed are 32 units, a total of 71 bedrooms. They're showing a little under 1,800 square feet of open space, 21 parking spaces, and a 4-story building. So here are the revised plans. They're showing the open space in this area here between the historic structure and the new building. And the main change between, well, there are several changes. The one change that we wanted to discuss specifically with the commission is this portion here, which wraps around the historic structure. You can see here that they changed it to 5 stories and that there's a flat roof. And again, here is the portion of the new building that wraps around the historic structure. I just have a few more elevations. This is the Davenport Street elevation. And this is a 3D model that the property owner also provided. When we took this to the Historic Preservation Commission in early July, they still had some concerns with the scale of the building, but there was a majority of commissioners who supported the revised plans and requested the following, specifically that the property owner develop a rehabilitation plan for the building at 410, 412 North Clinton Street, that we explore salvage of the demolished buildings at 400 North Clinton and 112 East Davenport Street, and that we look to ensure that the proposed wall around the open space is not physically connected to the historic structure. That's shown here. This is the wall that's being proposed along the open space, and the commission does not want it to connect with that historic structure. And then lastly, there's a concern that the maximum height be capped at five stories, that it couldn't go above 5 stories. The Friends of Historic Preservation were also in attendance at the July meeting, and they also appreciated the revisions that were made to the plans, and with the flat roof and the 5 stories. And they also echoed the commission's interest in having a rehabilitation plan for 410, 412 North Clinton Street. So at this point, the staff would like some direction from the council on whether or not we continue coordinating with the property owner to draft the necessary code changes that it would take for this project. We're also interested if there's any code changes that would not be supported by City Council, or if there's any other input or other factors that City Council would like us to consider. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mayor, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yep. So questions for Ann, comments?
Ann, I have a question. The height of 5 stories, does it, do we know how many feet that is? I mean, a lot of this newer construction, and I don't know if this would be their intent here, is going with higher ceilings. So each story is taking up more feet. I don't know if their renderings that they have are giving an indication of what that height would be.
I don't have the height in feet.
Okay.
I would need to ask the property owner that.
And they do not intend to tear down 410, which is the back part, correct? They intend to keep that?
That's correct.
That's too bad. That could be a huge improvement, offering some more open space as well as a better look. But I'll just say I am not excited. I'm not excited about this proposal, but I will defer to the Historic Preservation Commission if they are supportive of this in terms of you know, the compromise of this kind of development in order to get the preservation of 410, 412. I certainly agree with them with needing a written plan for the rehabilitation of that property so that we make sure that that gets done. I would still personally would prefer something smaller on this corner. I think we do have you know, an advantage, if you will, that given what they could redevelop under certain zoning could end up with 48 parking spots, and this, you know, the 21 plus the 9 that are already there that exist. So that's an improvement. So I'll support it as is, but I'm not excited about it.
Are these all?
Oh, go ahead.
Go right ahead, please.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I agree with Susan. I do appreciate the time that was taken to revise the original plan to align with a lot of our concerns. And the historic preservation concerns that they listed in their requests, I believe are important to consider. And Susan, I think there was something mentioned about the possibility of removing 410. And that would open up more green space, and it's never pleasant to see any building demolished, and it just doesn't seem fair or right that to use that building then as sort of a bartering chip to save another building. But I was one that originally voted to designate 412 as historic, and I still believe that it's important it's of value to our community, the history of our community. So I think that's important, but I also am not really happy with this total new plan.
I'm going to agree with both Pauline and Susan. I think the project is significantly better than what we first saw. So there's that. You know, we're really not in a very strong negotiating position. That's sort of the starting point here. And so with that being the case, you know, I appreciate the effort of staff and the developer to work toward a better plan. I do think it could be even better. And there were some additional comments made by the commission that I think would make it better, particularly the removal of the back apartment building. We are increasing the population and unit density of these 2 sites, or 3 sites actually. So, you know, creating a little bit better balance of open space with the occupancy count, as well as just the value of, as one of the Historic Preservation Commissioners mentioned, decluttering the historic building, I think would have some benefit. So again, I will be supportive of it. I do feel as a community, we are at kind of we're at perhaps an inflection point on our housing in the you know, the university impact zone. I do feel we need to, as best we can, promote quality as well as, you know, balancing quantity and quality. And there are increasingly better understandings of, you know, how to design buildings even larger buildings with a way of articulating them in ways where that block form can be broken up and create both not only a more attractive building, but a more livable building. You know, that facade along Davenport is 137 feet long, I believe. It's a big building. And there are ways in which one could have vertical stepping, you know, where it's not the 5 stories running from beginning to end. But this is not the project, it seems, where we can explore all those options. I do hope as we move forward that we do take advantage of this better understanding of how, you know, house form buildings can actually generate considerable density as well as block form buildings. The project near College Green on College Street across from Blank and McCune, I think is an excellent example of a house form building that has fairly high density. So I think we can do it. We just need to make sure that, you know, we promote it. Staff can explain to developers that there is potential with these other house forms or house form building of a higher density that could be used instead of what we see as the standard block form. But again, I think, you know, I appreciate the efforts that this thing has evolved and moved in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess for me, this was one of the ones that I voted to preserve, historic preservation. Now is back with another opportunity before us. I guess for me, I wanted to ask Ann, are there any affordable units, or the only thing that, I'm assuming that this is all at market rates? Market rate?
Yeah, it would be market rate.
Okay. So yeah, I do believe that, and Councilor Thomas just talked about the large number of influxed rentals within the university area. We don't have a shortage right now, that's for certain. I guess I'll be, you know, just kind of interested to see how all of this pans out. I know one of the questions you asked us, is there anything that we would advise staff, or is there anything else we're looking for? I'm not going to hold my hat long to think that the developer might include some affordable units, but that would be awesome if that could happen. I will be looking at that to see if there's an opportunity for that to take place. Other than that, you know, this is a lot of units. It's going from you know, that's a huge influx of units. And so the preservation of the buildings were very important given its location. So I'll just continue to bear all this in mind, but I at least wanted to just relay that the lack of affordable units, especially since we have such an influx of units in our university area, is of concern to me.
Mayor, I just wanted to quickly, in response to that, I think there were some notes in the meeting minutes from HRC. 412 Clinton is a boarding house. And so in an interesting way, it's the affordable housing piece of this project. So that historic building, at least historically, has been affordable. So it's good that we're preserving it in that regard.
I just want to ask you, Anne, you're saying that we are preserving it, but what we have in exchange, if we preserve it, how many, what their ask was, I just missed that. Like, they exchanging to preserve that building so we can give them, you mean like more stories, or what exactly?
Yeah, the property owners has agreed that to agree to the local landmark designation to preserve 410, 412, and in exchange for that voluntary designation, they could develop 400 North Clinton Street and 112 East Davenport Street at a higher intensity than our code would normally allow.
Yeah, how much? That's what I'm asking. Like what
Okay.
the difference between what we allow and what they want.
So in the current zone, it's a maximum of 35 feet. They're proposing 5 stories. They could get 24 one-bedroom units on that site now, and they're showing 32 units, 71 bedrooms, a portion of which is on the other property. So it's more units. It's a higher building. There's less parking being proposed. Those are the main things I would say.
Yes, you said 24 to 31 or 32. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, they could currently get 24 one-bedroom units,
Mm-hmm.
and their proposal has 32 units and 71 bedrooms.
Okay, which is like kind of eight unit more.
Yeah, and so and a lot more bedrooms.
A lot of yeah bedrooms. Yeah, you know, I really want to see some affordability on that, even if we agree to that. Especially we are saying now we need some like you know, on this area specifically, we need to see more affordability. I really hope if the developer can think about some portion of units to be affordable and on site. So that will be my request.
Okay.
I think we also need to keep climate action. That always comes up, and environmentally friendly units. I mean, the higher you go, the more units there are, the more people there are, the more energy is consumed, the higher number of parking spaces means more vehicles. So that's why I'm kind of against the extra height too. I'd be happy with 4 stories, which would seem more compatible with the surrounding area too, Courier and the historic building. It just would seem more compatible. It just kind of seems out of place being that tall and that long.
If I may just add a little bit of history and context to the decision here. So I think council's aware this was as Ann mentioned, something that we brought to you to designate as a landmark. The property owner opposed that, and it required a supermajority, which we didn't have. So we had a majority of council that wanted to preserve it, but we didn't have the supermajority to force that on the property owner. We then approached the property owner. So I just want to be clear. We went to the property owner and said, hey, we still want to save this. How can we make this happen? And at that point, you know, he said, well, there's this property next door. He doesn't, the same property owner doesn't own this property. So they would have to buy it and then build these units. And you know, for what they can buy the property for, these are the number of units that they need to produce to make the whole transaction work. So I don't know who mentioned it earlier, but we don't have a whole lot of bargaining here, because at some point it just doesn't become feasible for the developer. They're not going to buy that next door property, and we're just going to have to live with the fact that those properties are unprotected and could be demolished. So we can go back and we can talk about affordable housing, we can talk about climate, we can talk about bringing the scale down, but I can tell you it's not going to work. We're to the point now where I think this minor, you know, maybe some minor tweaks here and there, this is really what needs to move forward if we want to preserve this building as a landmark. And if we're not comfortable with it, that's okay too. And I think the developer is okay with that as well, because he doesn't own that adjacent property right now. So they can walk away and they're in the same spot they were before. So I just want to make sure we're framing this right, that this was really a city initiative that the developer is trying to respond to us on with a pretty creative solution. It's not a whole lot different than what we had with Augusta Place, where we had to kind of do some things we normally probably wouldn't do to save the church. This is kind of that same situation. I get it; it's not perfect, but if you wait for perfect, it's going to be too late. So that's kind of what we're here talking about today. And if I'm getting the sense that you folks are kind of lukewarm on it, my guess is the developer is going to have that same sense and probably not want to proceed and spend a whole lot of time and investment moving forward.
I guess it's worth the ask, Jeff. Well, I'm personally directing you to ask the developer that I ask this. Why not? Why we understand that we are the one. I guess I don't remember, but I think, but I'm the one who did not maybe I was one of the super majority, not making the super majority is not happening because I voted for that. I'm the same person now asking the same developer to if they can reserve something. We can ask and they have the right yes or no. But if we have something we want to see it, we just have to tell them our value. And, I just want you to take our request and ask them and come back. We're not in a hurry here.
I understand.
All right, any other items on this? Any other?
I just want to make clear that I do support the project. It's, as Jeff said, and I think I had mentioned earlier that this was the best, it seems like the best we can do. And I do appreciate all the effort that's gone into making it a better project. And so again, I'm supportive of it. And that 412, 410, those existing buildings that will remain, they're not going to be rent controlled, but as a boarding house, I suspect it will have a low rent. And that existing apartment building, if it were to remain, the one behind the historic building, I suspect its rents are fairly low as well. So they're not controlled, but I would not be surprised if they're relatively affordable.
Mayor, I know we're at time. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, James.
I was just, well, I was just going to say for staff, I wouldn't want anything less than what the majority of the Historic Preservation Commission requested. So the rehab plan is really important. Salvaging the other properties is important. Not connecting the wall to the historic structure, capping the height at 5 stories. I mean, I think we can't go anything less than what the commission was asking for, is my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to be clear here.
You want to unmute. There you go.
I'm not asking for less or anything. I'm requesting that a portion of this, like a lot of rooms and apartment to be affordable. And I think that's my ask for the developer. That's all.
I just want to confirm that I, like with John, this isn't perfect, it's not ideal, but I will support it as is. I think it's important just from a process standpoint for staff to really know where each of us are at in terms of what they feel they need to consult with the developer on. So I will support it as is, as Laura indicated, John indicated the things that the Historic Preservation Commission requested.
As I said, I do appreciate the changes that the developer made, and I think they are some very positive changes. I also do appreciate the recommendations from the commission. And I do believe that this current design is a major improvement over what is at 400 Clinton now in Bloomington. I think it will be a nice addition to that corner. I just wish it was a little smaller, but if we can't go with that, then I'll go along with it.
All right, thanks everybody. Thank you, Ann. Because of time, we're probably going to have to end our agenda right here and pick up, unless there's something pressing that a counselor wants to talk about right now. Hearing nothing else, we will be back at 7 p.m. All right, we're going to continue with the work session. We've already done, of course, the agenda items. So we have info packet discussions. We did have 2 items on, well, 3 items actually on here that we wanted to talk about. So we'll go with info packet numbers July 30th. IP7, and this is a memo from the Neighborhood and Development Services, which Services Director, Shelter House, which we did go over this a little bit. I don't know if staff want to give more update on the local eviction prevention program.
I think we covered this. We have our direction, so we can move on.
Great. And then 7:30 IP9, the Human Rights Commission minutes, July 16th. And this is requesting council direction for a consideration of a resolution on becoming a fair trade city. And this was in a previous agenda packet as well.
I found this information that it's a really honorable, I think, intention as it relates to human rights and marginalized workers and safe working conditions. I think that's really important. But I still would like to have just a little bit more information on it. Because it talked about purchasing some items for the city, and it said such as coffee or tea. But I think I'd like maybe a broader picture. Does it include other things like office supplies, or would it be the vendors that fill our vending machines and those kinds of products? Would those come from fair trade countries, or that kind of information I wasn't clear on. I'm really behind the idea, but just would like a little more information on what it would mean for us.
My understanding is that it can be as little or as much as the community is comfortable with. So literally it could be, I think the coffee and tea example was something easy, you know, when we provide that for the public or for the council, when we have in-person meetings again, if we did fair trade, that would qualify, but we're not making a commitment that would necessarily need to replace other procurement methods that we have for office supplies and other things like that. We could slowly take those things on. It'll be a balance between various efforts that we have, including getting the best price, shopping with local vendors, and then fair trade is kind of another element. But for starters, the Human Rights Commission felt if we could find something, be it coffee, tea, or something else that we could commit to, that would really give them the standing to do some education and outreach on what it means to be fair trade, and they thought it would just help their programming efforts. So again, my understanding is not a big commitment from the city, but it is a commitment to find something which I'm confident that we could probably do.
I'm actually happy that the Human Rights Commission is looking at the fair trade and have provided some information, although it's limited. I have actually had a one-on-one conversation about the fair trade. And so I do understand a lot more about the opportunities that it would provide, and I'm supportive of it. I would hope that maybe there could be more information given to counselors, which could be a one-on-one, just to learn more about what this means for our city. And I do agree with, we can just start wherever we feel comfortable and then increase as we desire.
I really support this. You know, in the beginning I wasn't know what the fair trade, like 2 years ago, I guess, I wasn't know what they mean by fair trade. And until they invite us as a Center for Worker Justice to come to Chicago for this, you know, like, it was a seminar or like event where they explain, and you see some people there who are doing this kind of fair trade stuff. And finally, I really understand. I think this is really fallen social justice and human rights things. And it's not like a really big commitment for the city. So we can like say, oh, maybe we cannot do everything fair trade. And when they, I guess when they give you the, as Jeff said, the example of the coffee and the tea, that what really is like, there is a lot of items, you know, kind of coffee and tea that is fair trade and easy to get. And this is just as simple as any business can be a fair trade, you know, if they just purchase any item from fair trade. And also, I guess when the city become a fair trade, by just using any fair trade product, especially if there is no big commitment. This will encourage a lot of business area to become a fair trade too, which is we just like setting this example and the standard high. I will support this, and I will encourage the council to support it.
I'll support it as well.
Go ahead, Jen.
I support it as well because among other things, it really is a further showcasing some of the values that we are working on very hard right now. We want to make sure that products we buy, what if we choose things like coffee and tea, are not produced, the people are not being paid a fair wage and are not being oppressed. And to me, that's a really important statement.
I would agree, and I would just encourage people, if you're looking for more information, just Google fair trade and you can get lots of information about the different kinds of companies and products and stuff. And certainly it doesn't commit us to buying everything that way, and an awful lot of what's done under the fair trade are things that are imported. So it sets a standard there, as Janice said, to make sure that people are being treated fairly that are working in these companies, and farmers and whoever else. So I strongly support this.
Yeah, I support it as well. I think it's a nice expression of kind of thinking globally, acting locally. So we're strong with our emphasis on the local aspect. I think this is an interesting proposal by Zachary, who I understand is an international studies major. So it seemed like a natural for him to pursued this and identified it as an opportunity.
I agree with everyone. Yes. Guess you already have your majority. Thanks, Mayor.
All right. Great. All right. So yeah, so that's kind of council's direction. We're supportive of it. The last item here is IP10 from July 30th. And this is a memo from Parks and Recs Director at Happy Hollow Park, baseball field infield conversion. And so we'll have that discussion now.
Well, as when we discussed this last, at our couple of meetings ago, I just wanted to make some comments on the process as it's unfolded over the last, well, several months actually. Relating to the park planning process, and then some of the issues related to Happy Hollow. In a manner similar to Happy Hollow ball field, changes to the field or ground surface came up recently with the prairie restoration proposal. The ground surface is an important factor in determining land use, as we learned with that program. And as we learned more about the park use at some of those prairie restoration sites, in some cases, the scope of work was revised or dropped entirely. Examples that were, I think, brought to council's attention were Benton Hill, Crandick, and Willow Creek in particular. In the case of Happy Hollow, the question of the field surface meant whether the ball field skinned infield would be replaced by turf, and thus becoming a recreational field. And this was not a question that was asked of the neighborhood residents or of the baseball, softball community. I do think moving forward that we really needed, as a city and as a community, to acknowledge and respect when we're proposing changes like this, the diversity of views and insights that are held by the park users, and that questions and proposals regarding changes to existing park use, whether initiated by the community or by staff, must publicly be asked of and clearly presented to these users, preferably at the beginning of the process. So that's kind of just the process aspect of this that I wanted to comment on. In terms of Happy Hollow, the staff's memo stated that based on their analysis of the permitting process, the primary user or users was the city's recreation division T-ball teams. And if in that instance, a turf infield is an adequate surface for T-ball. But this is where the participation of Michael Mullenbrook came in, and his letter I forwarded to you. It was in our discussion a month ago, and so I resent it to you a few days ago, where he provided a detailed description of the ball field's everyday use that is based on my outreach to the community, consistent with the information I received regarding the use of the ball field, both by members of the community and the youth and baseball, softball programs. First, I wanted to provide a little bit of background on that letter, which I didn't provide a month ago. Michael Mullenbrook was asked by Brian Mitchell, who is the head coach of the City High baseball team, to lead the response of the baseball, softball community on this question of restoring the ball field at Happy Hollow. So he took on that responsibility, representing that community. He prepared the letter and also posted it on change.org, and his letter, which is a little bit different from the one council received or was signed by 438 members of the community, many of which are supporters of the Iowa City baseball, softball community. I do think, to sum up his letter, what it stated was that in normal non-distancing times, that ball field at Happy Hollow is used spring, summer, and fall by all kinds of people, including baseball and softball teams, both formal and informal, and by both kids and adults. Activities include slow pitch softball, pickup games, batting practice, even kids being kids, just running around on the infield on the bases. So what I think we have in this case is, the ball field at Happy Hollow, which is located in a neighborhood setting, sees a different kind of use pattern than a ball field at our complexes. And that field rentals are part of the picture, but not the entire picture in terms of how that field is used. I think Michael made another, I think, very important note, and that was that removing the skinned infield did not add any recreational activities to those that already existed. Coordinated multi-use of the field is both desirable and encouraged. However, removing the skin surface eliminated the use of the field for softball and baseball, except for t-ball, thus excluding a considerable segment of the users, as was described earlier. Since the skinned infield was removed in spring several months ago, from what I can tell based on the social media, which ended up being kind of factored into that petition signing, the overwhelming response that I'm seeing from the community is to restore the ball field and to avoid this exclusion of the ball field use by softball and baseball. And that this is evidenced by the change.org petition. As a community, I do think we are better off when we are all accommodated. I don't see a reason why we would be pursuing an action or pursued an action which ended up eliminating a use of the field. In terms of the ball field supply and demand, many people in the ball field community noted that there is really no surplus of ball fields in Iowa City. And that caused me to look at North Liberty and some of the neighboring communities in terms of their ratio, which is usually for softball and baseball defined as number of ball fields per 10,000 residents. And North Liberty has both a complex of 9 fields at Penn Meadows and 5 single fields, 3 at elementary schools and 2 at neighborhood parks. So they have a total of 14 fields and a population of 20,000 people roughly. So that translates to around 7 fields per 10,000. Iowa City, just as a contrast, 75,000 residents, and staff noted that there are 16 ball fields which serve the same purpose as Happy Hollow. So that's roughly a little over 2 fields per 10,000 residents. You know, North Liberty is probably a gold standard, I would think. You know, based on other cities that I was looking at, you know, anywhere from 3 to 5, I think, is more typical. But again, it just reaffirmed the fact that we don't really have a surplus of ball fields in Iowa City. And then lastly, I would say that what also I think was missing from this conversation was the uniqueness of Happy Hollow Ball Field. And Michael noted this, and it was affirmed by some of the petitioners, that Happy Hollow Ball Field, or the ball field at Happy Hollow, has carved out a unique niche in Iowa City. To many, including the Iowa Writers Workshop, it is actually hallowed ground. It is cherished for its memories as well as for its unique natural setting, which is somewhat removed from the surrounding cityscape. It is, you know, these qualities which have been strengthened by the new shelter and restroom, and will be further enhanced with the prairie restoration and any future park improvements. You know, I will just end by saying that due to COVID-19, the community was not able to celebrate that 75th anniversary of Happy Hollow. It was founded in 1945. I do hope, my vision now is that next spring we will be able to celebrate that 75th anniversary. And I hope that we have the ball field restored at that time so we can all enjoy its use once again. So those were my thoughts on this. You know, my timeline is kind of defined by what I just described. I think at this point, what's most critical is that we acknowledge that the field is well used, perhaps in a different way than the complex ball fields, but nevertheless very well used, and that we restore it so that it can go back into use next spring.
Maybe I can offer a couple of thoughts, and please understand we'll do whatever the council sees as the best course of action here. But we did this with the belief that it was in the best interest of the neighborhood, that the neighborhood would support it based on the feedback that we were getting. Obviously, our folks are in the parks a lot. We make changes to the land use of parks every year. We put new sidewalks in to promote sustainability or to promote accessibility. We plant trees, we put benches in, we replace playground equipment. We'll put up pavilions in different locations. Some of those, for larger projects, we do community meetings with, like we did with Happy Hollow here, and others we do based on just the feedback that we have and the observations that our park staff has, who again are in these parks on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, on some of the parks. We can again certainly convert these fields, convert the field back. I think if we do so, I think there needs to be an expectation that the field is maintained to a ball field standard, which it was not being done before. And a lot of the concerns that we had from the neighborhood and from those that use the field, frankly, was that we weren't able to keep up with the maintenance of the field as we would at a complex. And one of the major challenges with that, which we struggle with throughout the city, is the no chemical policy that we adopted several years ago. And that's a great policy and we wholeheartedly support it. We just have to recognize that from a maintenance standpoint, it takes a lot longer to have people handpick weeds out of an infield than it would be to apply, a chemical, which we no longer do. So this was one area where we felt the maintenance staff was stretched pretty thin to go and keep that field up to date. So if we are doing this for the ball field community, then we should maintain it to the ball field community's standards or close to, because we don't want to be caught in that halfway zone or tweener zone that we were in before. And I think what the neighborhood would need to understand, if we're maintaining it at a higher level, it will get a lot more playability, and you will see parts of that park that are fairly restricted, or more so restricted in use than it was before. So, for example, when we're playing rec league softball or t-ball, you can go ahead and have a picnic in the outfield because the kids aren't going to hit it out there. If you're opening this up to Little Hawks Baseball League and you're going to play a lot more games out there and a lot more practices, that outfield is going to be occupied, and you're going to have less of that casual rec type of use in the outfield. So those are some of the factors that lead us as staff to say there's some pros and cons, and neither decision is a wrong decision. But what I fear the most is that we go and we put back the infield the way it was, and then we get pushback from the community another way. And if we're at fault for not seeking input on this specifically before we made the change, then I'd hate to see us repeat that mistake by going and making another change without sitting down and making sure that everybody understands the trade-offs that are involved with this type of conversion. So again, our staff is happy to do whatever the council sees fit. Please understand we were well-intentioned in our change here, and we weren't doing this for any type of selfish reasons. We were doing this because we felt it was going to serve the park users better, and we didn't feel like our fields were booked at a capacity that prevented others from playing baseball in those other fields that we have. So we'll just sit back and answer questions. Julie's on the line, can get much more detailed than I can on this, but we'll look for your guidance on where to go from here.
I guess my thought, and you probably all know I'm a big supporter of sport and athletics, et cetera, and opportunities for people. But I guess as I've listened to this and try to spend a little bit more time with it, it does kind of seem like there's somewhat of a conflict between the softball, baseball community and maybe the neighborhood members who, you know, see this as more of a recreational field space, multiple use kind of space, where for lots of little kids running around and stuff, I think more turf is better than more dirt area, and especially when it's difficult to keep it maintained at the level that even the neighborhood wants. And because certainly when I've been down there at times, it's had that appearance of, especially before we got the new structures and stuff in, but the field itself still kind of looking run down and not particularly well maintained. And as Jeff said, you know, we've got certain standards and, you know, no pesticide, herbicide type, you know, products and stuff. So a lot more manual labor. And when we're looking, you know, real carefully at what our budget is, and, you know, I mean, let me tell you, we've got people who want to put in, you know, a lot more fields and get those numbers, you know, closer to North Liberty with that East Side project, and have a lot more possibilities for all of our kids all across the community. So for right now, my preference is to stay with the turf that's been put in. If anything, take the next year or so to get more feedback from the actual neighborhood in terms of their thinking of it and their use of it and their preference. I don't want to see us do a quick reflex reaction of flipping back without making sure that to go back really is the right thing to do. So I would like to keep it as is and give us some more time if necessary to reevaluate.
I think one thing that distinguishes this question of reverting the field, one thing that distinguishes this from something like the prairie projects that we were looking at a couple months ago, where we heard public input and directed staff to scale back, is that this change has already been made, and what we're talking about is an additional new expenditure to revert it back to something. And so there's not really, in my mind, there's not this sort of urgency timeline as we had in that kind of situation. And I reviewed the change.org petition and all the comments that were on there and what I was seeing on social media. And I have a little bit of a concern, and I think you all know I'm always very favorable to additional input and making sure that people are engaged and that the right people are engaged. I have a little bit of a concern that some individuals thought that the park was being decommissioned. Some of the comments seem to indicate that you know, Happy Hollow itself might be going away and that it needed to be preserved as a park. And certainly that's not at all what's happening. In fact, there's, you know, improvements that have been recently completed, which are really wonderful, and the additional improvements that are coming in just a couple of years. So I think that this seems like the kind of thing where if there really is that, to Jeff's point as to, you know, that balance between the true sort of baseball community and the pickup needs of the neighborhood, seems like a really great kind of neighborhood association or kind of neighborhood organizing. I am hesitant to make this change based on the requests of the baseball and softball community that are trying to compare a facility like this to like what we see in North Liberty or Coralville. I mean, I think we know because of our herbicide policies that our fields look a lot different. The aesthetic is different. It's not the same kind of use, and certainly isn't in a neighborhood park. So I'm very sensitive to, you know, I don't want to invite something that's going to bring in a lot of outside traffic to a neighborhood park and end up being, you know, kind of the opposite of what people wanted. So my desire would be to leave it for right now.
But I just like to respond to Susan and Laura. Many of, I emphasize, maybe I overemphasize the signers of the petition representing the ball field community. There were many people from the city at large, as well as from the neighborhood, who also supported the idea of restoring the field. So it was not, there was not this dichotomy of the neighborhood preferring a multi-use versus the ball field community wanting the ball field restored. Prior to the petition going out, I contacted folks in the North Side area and received, I believe, 20 responses back. And the majority of them wanted the field restored. Some were neutral on it, but were not happy that the neighborhood wasn't asked. But I was not seeing majority support for losing the infield. So, you know, in hearing your comments, I'm certainly, as I said, my time frame at this point was to restore the ball field by next spring. So we do have a number of months here if we did want to engage in a public participation process. I'm open to doing that, but I also did not mention that we had a meeting last year to discuss future park improvements, and the notion of taking out the infield was not advocated for by the neighborhood, nor even considered. That was not something brought up at that meeting. So that to me also suggested that no one was thinking about changing the use of the ball field in the way that it was done. Again, if we need confirmation of that, so be it. But there were a number of occasions where the neighborhood had an opportunity to offer and recommend or suggest the idea that we take out the infield, and that was not forthcoming from the neighborhood.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, because I want to just offer this. We did have the neighborhood meeting, and Councilman Thomas was obviously heavily involved. You're very dedicated to this park, and you've been very involved in the process. We put together our plan kind of post the neighborhood meeting, and I did forward that to you, Councilman Thomas, in October. of last year, just to make sure that we were on the same page on what the improvements were. And it involved some of the tree planting and the limestone blocks, but it also noted on there our intention next year, which ended up being this year, to convert that baseball field. So we did develop that improvement out of the neighborhood meeting because of the input. Yes, it wasn't discussed, but oftentimes what happens is we hear comments from the neighborhood about the maintenance and or whatever they may be, and we look for solutions, and that was our solution. And maybe we should have checked back in with the neighborhood, but we did choose to make that change after the neighborhood meeting based on input we have. Again, that input wasn't, you need to change, you need to convert the field. It was just that identified it as an issue, the maintenance of it as an issue, and that was our solution. So we did try to be open about that, and I tried to relay that to you before we did it to make sure that we weren't going to do anything that was going to not be received well by the neighborhood. And I understand that that communication didn't work out, but at least there was an attempt to do that.
So, Mayor, if this is Julie, if I could jump in for a second. What I would say is that during the community meeting, we listen for the neighborhood wants and their needs, and we don't always have the solution on site. But in that case, the other thing we heard very strongly was people wanting to play in the open field, wanting to play soccer. And I would suggest if we're going to poll people for what the use of the park should be, we really need to include the soccer community because they're very happy with having the additional green space and the soccer goals to play in the outfield. I would argue also that although the use would seem a little different with the skinned infield, the uses that we had seen there in the past few years can all definitely still happen on the grass infield. Practices for the baseball, for the softball, the t-ball, the writer's workshop, probably safer for them to be on grass. So we are seeing continued use of the field by the casual users and the type of uses that we saw before that. We really felt this was an equity issue too, in that this now makes it a recreational field like we have in other parts of the community, all used that same way. So we're happy to do whatever you'd like to do, but there was a lot of thought and background put into this before we made the change.
Could I ask a finance related question? What, more or less, how much, if it were converted back at these times of pretty tight finances, how much are we talking about?
So we have over the season, now I don't know the exact amount for skinning it and bringing the gravel back in, but over the season right now with just mowing it as turf, the total cost is about $3,500, $3,500. To maintain it to a level of the other baseball fields, and this takes into account, unfortunately, the extra travel time and whatnot, to bring a specialty crew there, that's about $18,600 per season. So there's a significant cost savings for doing it with the grass infield. And once again, that's based on the actual use that we saw in the years leading up to the change.
Julie, I think Janice is probably asking about the conversion back, the cost there. I think it's probably going to depend on where we land on the level of playability. You know, if it's just converting it back to the dirt, and we accept the fact that it's probably not going to make the baseball community too happy at the end of the day because it's not going to be extremely playable for the more advanced youth. I don't think it's that large of an expense, but if you want to establish a very playable ball field, you're going to look at a fairly decent expense. Julie, do you have any estimate on what that would be to get it all graded out?
Well, we know that on other fields that we've recently graded, the grading alone is about $5,000 to $6,000. But I don't have an estimate on what it would take to put it back to exactly like it was before.
I appreciate the other part too. That other piece is important as well. I have to say that right now with looking at finances and looking at where we are, that piece alone is going to lead me to say, let's leave it as it is for at least for a year or two, see how it works out. I just can't justify the extra cost right now.
So far, we have about 3 counselors wanting to keep it as is. I wanted to just quickly learn what other counselors are thinking. You don't have to elaborate if you don't want to.
Well, just quickly, I wasn't really certain on this one until I did see the letter from Mr. Mellenbrook, and it was obvious that perhaps it wasn't really clear on how that ball field had been used. It was used for more than just recreational uses. So it was more usable with the skinned field, and that people were kind of surprised and shocked when that was converted. So from what I'm hearing, they would much prefer that it was converted back to the skinned field. But I have to admit, I don't know a lot about baseball fields and baseball versus softball, but that would be my opinion.
Okay. Look like Mayor Pro Tem isn't on anymore. So keeping it the way it is right now, is that what I understood from you, Councilor Taylor? Okay.
What's that? To convert it back eventually, as soon as we can. As soon as we can.
So you were saying convert it back?
Yes.
As soon as we can?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for that clarification. I looked at when I hear the 438 signatures, that sound like a large part of the community coming out to say that they want the change. Councilor Burgess talked about looking at the fine, looking at the comments specifically on change.org, and how some of that was probably people were misinformed, or they had an assumption that actually wasn't the issue, and that was converting it back. So for me, I believe that if we were to do anything, we have to get the comments or public input. And so for now, I'm inclined to say leave it as it is. Let's go at least 1 to 2 summers to see what the input will be from the community. Allow them to try it out. It's been converted. It is unfortunate the way that things happen, but Iowa City is a community that really likes to weigh in on things. And so it's already been done. I believe at this point, we would just allow it to, COVID-19 has definitely affected a lot of things in our community. So I would say let's hold off, give it a year, a max of 2, and then if we appear to, if there appears to be interest to convert it back, then we'll have conversations at that point. And I believe Mayor Pro Tem is trying to get back on. It'll take her a minute. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So we were just finalizing on just getting quick comments about either keeping the park as is, Happy Hollow as is, or converting it back. Did you want to weigh in or no? Seem like I don't have a sound from her. So at this point, it seems that we have the majority to keep it as is and to go.
Hello, you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to keep it as it is for now.
Okay. All right. I did hear 1 to 2, I think I heard 2 years kind of reevaluating the park. Is that fair to say 2 years to reevaluate?
I think, Mayor, doing it concurrently with the plan for the renovations that are happening on that timeline makes sense to me.
Yeah, this is Julie again. We have planned renovations for 2023 of the playground area. So that means that next summer would be the summer we do the, or no, sorry, 2022 would be when we do the outreach and neighborhood meetings for that project. So that would be a great time to get the input for this.
So Councilor said nodding, so I'm going to take that as majority unless, yes. Yep. All right. So that sounds great. Any other comments related to this item? Hearing none. Any, at this point, we want to do any updates for assigned boards, commissions, and committees, as well as any general comments from council?
Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, I kind of dropped the ball on the consent calendar items because there were two that I just wanted to make quick comments on if my fellow councilors would humor me on that for just a minute. That be all right? Okay.
I hope it involves a park named after a person, but yes.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. That was actually the top item in correspondence 8F. Very important. We received a lot of correspondence on that. But I think that the people who wrote in, and also maybe the new members for the benefit of Janice and Laura, perhaps don't know the protocol and the process. Maybe you don't even know, because it's only been once in the time I've been on the council where we've renamed a park. If the staff has a moment now or could send us info or include it in another meeting, the actual protocol and process for naming. I mean, we can't just out of our hat throw out and say, okay, let's name it that. There's a process that has to be followed. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm very much in favor of it. I mean, it sounds like this would be a wonderful person to name that park after. But there is a process. We can't just do that, I think.
If I can jump in, if you would allow me to just talk about this particular item. So there were letters submitted to council about renaming a park after a very famous person that lived in our community, James Allen McPherson. He was a writer. African American. He was an African American writer. He wrote essays and he was an author, but he was also the first African American to win the Pulitzer Prize in fiction. And I knew him personally. One of the great things that I think we have right now is we're going to be forming the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I know that one other thing that is a part of our resolutions, it will be considering renaming a park. I think that this is something that we can give to that commission for consideration. Personally, I think he would be a great option, but I think in respect to Black Lives Matter, and we have this a part of our resolutions already, I suggest we kind of give this over to them, whatever body is going to be making those decisions, and then allow them to come forth with some recommendations. But James Allen McPherson would be one of my top picks for certain. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's exactly, what I was going to say. I mean, I would do it in an instant because it just sounds like he would be a perfect person. And he lived in that neighborhood, so it's even more suited, more fitting to do that. So that's all I had to say on that.
I would just say that I think it would be helpful if staff maybe did in our next packet, just put in what that process is supposed to be. I think even if we end up giving it to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think we want to make sure that we're still following council process in doing things. So I would like to see that so we know that we're following that, even if we do delegate it to somebody else.
I agree, Susan. That's kind of what my point was, that get that information out there on what the process truly is. Yeah, thank you. The only other item, Mayor, if that's all on that topic, was, I believe it was Resolution 6A. It was about the procurement manual. And I just wanted to say that I was happy to see the provision added regarding requiring minimum wage preference for the places that we do business with. I really like that.
Anyone
That's all.
else? Great, thank you. Hearing no one else.
I'm always willing to chime in, Mayor. You should know that by now. But I would just like to thank everybody out there who is wearing a face covering. Encourage you to continue it because it really is going to help our community moving forward. And on actually a sad note, I'd really like to send my condolences, heartfelt condolences to the city of Beirut, which just experienced a horrendous explosion. Many deaths, many injuries.
Mayor, just a couple of seconds. For those who didn't watch our work session this evening, I just wanted to tout again the city's progress tracking on our resolution relating to Black Lives Matter. You can find it online at icgov.org/BLM and encourage people to go there as we'll be updating that continuously. Also wanted to just highlight the board and commission vacancies that were at the end of that formal agenda. What an excellent way to get involved in public service in Iowa City. I think people are feeling right now, this is a moment where they're not really sure what they can do to contribute, what they can do to impact their community, and service on boards and commissions. Councilor Thomas was saying this to me just the other day. It's such a great way, and being involved is kind of, I think his words were, the gateway drug to civic engagement, and certainly that level of service is really, really important and critical for our recommendations that are made to us on City Council. So I hope people look at those and apply. Thank you.
All right, hearing no more comments, we will be adjourned for the evening.